Hi, everyone. Welcome to Time for Health Talks, brought to you by CVS Health. It's my pleasure to welcome Jewel, a singer-songwriter and mental health advocate, and Dr. Blaise Aguirre, a child and adolescent psychiatrist on the faculty at Harvard Medical School. If you have any questions for our guests, please tweet them using the hashtag Time for Health, and Jewel and Blaise will be answering them for about 30 minutes after the show. Jewel, you released a song during quarantine called Grateful. What was it like to write that song? Where were you? And what was going on in your life?
My music's always been my medicine. You know, I started writing for myself. I started with lullabies, actually. I remember it was Angel Standing By was one of the first songs I wrote. And it was because I was scared and lonely, and I'd fall asleep at night feeling really sad. And I wrote Angel Standing By as if somebody was saying something nice to me, except I didn't have anybody to say it to me. And so I just wrote a song so I could sing it to myself. And I would rock back and forth because I had a lot of trauma, and I would just sing myself this, and it would just kept me here. You know, it kept me on the planet. And that's always how my music was. And Grateful really is no exception. It's me still exploring, what are we going through as a culture? What am I going through? What am I clinging to? What energetic ground am I standing on as I face a challenge in my life with COVID? That's my principle, you know, that I'm willing to say, I believe in this. And that really is the power of gratitude and the fact that nobody can take my happiness from me, not unless I give it to them. And you're going to have to pry it out of my hands.
Jewel, you've been really candid about having a tough childhood. What were some of your mental health struggles as a kid, and what was that like to deal with at such a young age?
For people that aren't familiar with my story, the sort of really thumbnail sketch is my mom left when I was 8. My dad took over raising me and my brothers. My dad had PTSD. He was raised in a really abusive childhood, to the point where when he went to Vietnam, he realized it was relaxing. So that tells you about my dad's childhood. When my mom left, she took over raising us to handle the trauma triggering. We, of course, didn't know words like trauma, PTSD, or trauma triggering. He started drinking to try and medicate that, and it didn't go well. He became abusive, and I moved out at 15. Became homeless at 18 when I refused to have sex with the boss. Was living in my car, and then my car got stolen. So it was definitely a rough ride. But a lot of good things happened too. Little things that ended up being huge milestones, or ended up paying off dividends later, like singing in bars for me. I watched people in pain every day. I could tell my dad was in pain. We were a duet. He was drinking to handle that. And I watched people in bars drinking, doing drugs, relationships, rage, all kinds of things. And what it looked like to me as a kid, you know, probably about 8, was people had this pain, and then they just kept trying to bury it under this mountain of stuff. But then the mountain became painful. And I watched it kill people. And so I made a commitment in my life to try and figure out what to do with pain, and why aren't we taught about pain? I became on a mission to try and find my authentic, real nature. And that journey set me off on an incredible adventure that involved music. But really the number one goal always was, how do I advocate for myself? How do I fight for my happiness if happiness wasn't taught in my home?
Blaise, what are your tips for people to express themselves creatively in a way that can help them heal as it helps Jewel?
Creativity, you know, that ability to sort of generate ideas and then, you know, put them down in some sort of creative manner, doesn't necessarily come either readily, easily, or in the same way for everyone. So, I mean, my life is almost the 100% opposite of what I came from a life of some privilege, you know, was able to go to medical school. Not too many bad things happened to me along the way. I think I got drunk a couple of times, you know, took up smoking cigarettes, you know, but I mean, just like, you know, some stuff. And then I was thinking about this question of nature versus nurture, and I thought, I've had all the wonderful nurture in the world. But I also came to the same question. It's like, what the hell's my nature? Here are two very, very opposite, very, very different backgrounds that get to the same point. You know, we're climbing a mountain, and here we are. We're at the top. How did we get there? Okay, so the thing is, it's not like I'd say okay, I want, you to learn how to play the guitar or learn how to write or whatever it is. But there's, to me, most, it's not even a creativeness, but just to realize that all joy exists in this present moment, all of happiness, and opening your mind to sort of see it will allow creativity, and the creativity. And then some people have tremendous talent in poetry, in writing, in painting and sculpting, and all of those sorts of things. But maybe going for a walk, that's the new creation, because now you're outside and you're seeing the world in a new way. There's the new creation. So I think of this idea of creativity in a slightly, not in a necessarily solely focused on art.
I never thought I'd be an artist. I never thought I'd be a professional writer or a professional singer. I remember when I first started writing, it's when my dad started hitting me. I think the greatest value of anybody sitting down to write isn't to be creative, isn't anything. It's to give yourself a safe place to tell the truth. And if you will commit to that, it's not about how clever you are or how good your writing is. It's just how honest you are. And can you create a space where you can suspend self-judgment, right? A lot of times we sit down to write and it stimulates our self-critic because we think we have to be as good as what we think art is or something. It's not about any of that. It's just, can you create a safe place for yourself? It might be your only safe place in the entire world. It was for me.
What were some of the things that helped you feel better?
I had heard of meditation young. I had an aunt that taught me transcendental meditation when I was 14. So I'd heard of meditation, but there was no philosophy around it, at least that I was taught. So words like mindfulness and being in the now and being present, those weren't concepts I was familiar with. But I was raised in a creative family and I was raised writing. So every time I sat to write, I just noticed I felt better. I noticed it helped me handle my pain. I was in intolerable levels of pain, but writing just took that edge off enough that I could keep tolerating it. And a fascinating thing happened. Every time I wrote, I learned something. It was wild. It was like sitting down with a teacher. I had noticed things I didn't realize I noticed. And I always felt calmer and I always felt less anxious. It's kind of a funny word, mindfulness. It's like this big blanket term you hear that kind of seems to be this giant catch-all. But if I could define mindfulness, it's just the ability to perceive a thought and create an action, to create a gap before you act on it. And writing does that. If you're observant and curious, you're forced into the present and you're stopping and you're pausing and you're creating this gap. And then this gap is change. Like, that's the magical place where you're not just neurologically giving a knee-jerk reaction that you were maybe wired to do since your childhood. You now get to perceive a thought, wait, and think if you want to have a new behavior. And that's really exciting.
So that's something you basically came up with on your own through trial and error?
Yeah, a lot of stuff through trial and error. A lot of it came later when I was probably 18, when I was homeless. And I realized I was going to end up in jail or dead. I was shoplifting. Things weren't going well for me. And I remembered this quote one day. I was trying to steal a dress. And I remembered this quote that happiness doesn't depend on who you are or what you have. It depends on what you think. What form was I creating my life with my thoughts? And the anxiety wasn't even letting me perceive my thoughts in real time. So a lot of the exercises I started developing were trying to find ways of getting myself present enough to realize what my thoughts were. And then developing exercises of how to change those thoughts, how to change habits, how to reprogram my brain.
Blaise, in one paper you wrote, you describe activities sort of like the ones that Jewel is talking about as part of living an antidepressant life. That was your phrase. What sorts of things have been shown to be important and effective?
So the thing is that there's just so much evidence that lots of the things that we do bring joy to our minds and joy to our experience. And the magic is just realizing that it's always been within us, and that there's a trap to thinking that we can get to happiness through drugs or medications and other things. I mean, so before we head straight to the pharmaceutical approach to depression and anxiety, it's that there are things that you can do that is going to lift your mood in any case. Like, for instance, you cannot be sad and skip at the same time. And I remember I had a patient who was telling me that they're very, very depressed. And I said, well, you can't be happy and skip at the same time. And they said, well, I'm not going to go to my program. And I said, I'll tell you what, if you will go to your program skipping, I will skip all the way with you. And so it was about 200 yards, and so you had this sort of Harvard guy skipping along with his patient. And by the time we got there, both of our moods had lifted. There were a lot of raised eyebrows as well at the same time. But I'm just saying that there's lots of things that we can do that actually bring us joy, and they can change in a second. That we don't have to say, okay, take this medication and maybe 6 weeks from now you're going to feel better. Right now, the conditions for happiness exist right now, but we just have to pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything you're saying. I have so many thoughts. What you said, if you can't be sad and skip at the same time, you can't be in two states at once. And something I realized again when I was 18 is that there's these two basic states of being. There's dilated, where you feel open and calm and relaxed, and then there's contracted. That's it. We oscillate between one of those two states, and you cannot be in two states at once. And so I realized every thought, feeling, or action leads to one of those two states. And so I got really curious. I started in my journal writing, oh, I feel like this. What was I thinking just now? What was I doing just now? What was I feeling just now? And writing it down. And I ended up having 2 columns, and they were really clear, joy, gratitude, curiosity, observation, love, generosity, all dilating. And then on the other column, everything you would imagine, fear, anxiety, greed, jealousy, et cetera, et cetera. And I realized because you can't be in two states at once, you can hack your way out of a tight state by really committing to something on your list that dilates you. And for me, I chose gratitude. The trick is you have to be profoundly stimulated by the feeling. You can't just say, I'm grateful I have my health, which I've had that feeling where you just can't generate and stimulate that authentic feeling. But I remember the first time I was able to ward off my very first panic attack by using it. This amazing moment where I was on a street corner, I felt a panic attack coming on. I was getting mindful enough to see it building, and I was like, I'm going to really commit to great gratitude and see if I can force my system to dilate. And I watched the sun filtering through a tree, and it just reminded me of being a little girl in Alaska. And it almost moves me to tears now, the countless times that I would look at the sun filter through the trees. And I had that feeling of just this profound beauty and gratitude. And now there's a lot of science behind it. Your vascular system really does dilate. Your blood pressure really does drop. Your neurotransmitters change. The blood flow patterns change in your brain. And it's because of that one simple piece of knowledge. You can't be in two states at once. And those little tricks are so cool.
Well, what's interesting is that it took Jewel direct observation to get to where she is. It took me 7 years of medical school and 5 years of psychiatric residency to, at great cost, to just realize that what she's saying is the truth. And actually, when we do some of the work that we do, we actually ask the people that we work with who are really struggling with mental illness to pay attention to exactly that. Because, all of a sudden you're feeling better. Well, what happened to worse? Where did it go? And you feel like you're going to be stuck in suffering for a very long period of time, but now it's disappeared. But where is it?
I'm writing a book right now, and I had a sentence the other day that said, peace isn't the absence of something. It's the willingness to come into harmony with what is. So often we think peace is saying, I'll be peace, I'll have happiness, I'll have peace when I'm no longer anxious. I'll have peace or happiness when I no longer have this person in my life or this feeling. We can't get peace by trying to push everything out. We can only have peace when we ask it to come closer. And when I first started to realize my anxiety wasn't my enemy, it was my friend, it was such a transformative moment. My anxiety was my ally. My anxiety was trying to tell me something. My anxiety was like a car alarm on a car saying somebody's trying to hijack you. Something's wrong. But all I ever did was say, shut up, car alarm. Stop trying to tell me that something's wrong. I'm going to medicate it. I'm going to numb it. I'm going to push it down. When I started looking at it as an ally, that maybe something isn't wrong with me. Maybe I'm anxious for a reason. Maybe my life doesn't agree with me. Maybe with the job I have or the people I'm surrounding myself in or the thoughts I'm having don't agree with me the way food poisoning is, right? When you eat something that makes you sick, your body lets you know you're sick. Don't eat that again. Well, our anxiety's like that. It really is an ally. And when I started to sit, as hard as it was, when I meditated and go, what is my anxiety trying to tell me? What am I not in agreement with? I started realizing a lot of my life didn't suit me. I needed to change a lot of things. Now I had a choice, I could ignore it and ignore my anxiety and just keep going on until I became ill, tolerating the intolerable. Or I could say, what thought, feeling, or action was I just doing that doesn't agree with me? And thank you, anxiety, because you're trying to teach me and I will pay attention.
Jewel, as part of your charity, you offer the tools that have worked for you to kids who are struggling now. They're also taught in schools. So why did you choose to focus on children's mental health?
That feeling I had when I was 15 of, what about me? I'm having terrible nurture. Will I get to know my real nature? If happiness wasn't taught in my home, is it learnable, or am I just kind of a lost cause? And feeling like a lost cause at 15 sucks. And a lot of people feel that way. More and more, actually. When you look at society, we've progressed in technology, but we're not happier. So can we call this progress? If we were being judged as a society, have we progressed as humanity? If our suicide rates are up 60% since 2006, there are so many kids and adults of every age, socioeconomic background, that feel like the world's built for other people, that there's no hope for them. And that's absolutely not true. I was a kid that didn't have access to therapy. And we should have scalable, usable tools that will help rewire your brain that you can practice no matter what, no matter if you have an educational background, no matter what your socioeconomic background is. And so that's what I wanted to try and help, were these kids that were kind of like me, dysfunctional family systems, the parents may not be, that's kind of, that it got me to engage in a whole value. Doesn't make it if we curate, what photos we show on social, and you start seeing these kids.
And make it.
That is the way that the thing that you're learning, again, you could say what's your brain, anybody who doesn't learn through repetition. We all learn through repetition. It's just, what are you repeating? You repeat, nobody will ever love me. You repeat, my life sucks. You repeat, I am depressed, and over and over and over. And then you look for things in the environment that tell you, that that's the way that you should feel. You're just going to get good at thinking that. So it does rewire your brain the way that any repetition rewires the brain. So now, if things are difficult, it's not that you want to delude yourself and go the other way and say, oh no, everything's perfect. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that you've got to recognize that that's a pattern. Because once you start seeing the world through that lens, but look at it through reality, not through this, we talk about fake news all the time. The brain's the biggest generator of fake news that there is.
Yeah, and again, when I was 18, my dad was an addict. I promised I would never drink or do drugs, but I obviously became really addicted to shoplifting. And my panic attacks were getting more and more frequent. So that made me think, okay, this is some kind of addiction of its own as well. And either God made a huge mistake and is like, sorry, humanity, about that addictive part of your brain, or there's a reason we can become addictive, right? That there has to be a biological reason that our brains are capable of this. And can we get addicted to good things? Addiction really is, beyond chemical dependency, repetition. It's just, how often do you go to that? How often has your body learned, this is what we do. When I feel like this, I do this. And it starts prompting you.
It's amazing that some of your early work, it sounds like, came from these experiences. Did any of your early hits come as a result of trying to keep your brain on task and rewire it?
Yeah, I wrote my song Hands, about trying to perceive my thoughts in real time. That quote of, happiness doesn't depend on who we are, what we have, but what we think. I couldn't witness my thoughts in real time. And so I thought if I watched my hands, it would be like watching my thought cooled into action, because your hands are the servants of your thought. So if you want to see what you're thinking, watch what you're doing all day. And that was kind of my way of figuring out how to figure out what I was thinking. And that was the first time I was really able to get my anxiety to come down. And it's because it forced me to be present. I wasn't expecting that result, as I just kept a journal on everything my hands did for 2 weeks. It was the stupidest life plan, but it's all I had at the time. my anxiety just kind of melted away every time I was just intently focused on journaling and watching and observing my hands. And I learned so much about fear. You know, fear is this thief, and it takes the past and it projects it onto a future that hasn't even happened. And the weird thing is it's trying to keep me safe, but it's robbing me of the only opportunity I have to keep myself safe, which is showing up right now. And that's the really odd thing about it. It's the odd thing about worry and anxiety is it's robbing us of the only chance, which is being here right now. And that's the one skill we really have atrophied as a society, is the ability to really be present. If you are present in your life and in your home, you're going to notice when your kid isn't doing well. You're going to notice it, and you're going to make a little adjustment. If you're present in your community, you're going to notice when your neighbor isn't doing well, and you're going to make a little adjustment. A radical form of activism that people don't really give enough credit to is just being present. It's the only way that we can change ourselves or the systems that we live in.
Blaise, there are unprecedented rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide in children today, and now there's a pandemic. What do you tell the parents of kids and teens about being anxious and being depressed during this time?
So what I want to do is I want to recognize that this is an anxiety-provoking time for so many people. Why? Because people are dying, yes. Because people are losing their jobs. Because people have, financial worries. They have food worries. There's no question about that. And I think that as a society, we can do better. But then when we bring all of that home and then, kind of transmute this feeling of despair, then it's easy for all of those in our environment to feel just as bad. So I think it's important to just recognize that there is a collective experience that people are having. But I also think it's so important to be honest. That is an experience, because one of the things that parents do, and I see this all the time, they call this better for a parent to say, for each other, and that we can do certain things and all of these sorts of things. Their experiences. So that's the space. That's something that's going to be, because it kind of looks goofy, but then they sort of start, you've changed. It's right now you can feel better.
Thank you.
So I'll just sing a little bit of Grateful.
When everything's wrong, when I do I see there's a remedy. It's all the little things that make the world go round. It's all the little things that are most powerful. There's no politician, no sky to die. No one can take the love from my heart, 'cause the sun gonna shine in this heart of mine. The sun gonna shine in this heart of mine. The sun gonna shine, oh, it's true, 'cause I can always be grateful in the loudest sound. Your own life crashing down. When your friends they don't come around, there's one true thing I found. The sun gonna shine in this heart of mine. The sun gonna shine in this heart of mine. The sun I can always be
That was gorgeous. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching Time for Health Talks, brought to you by CVS Health. Be well.